All right, hello everyone. This is the biweekly code organization subproject meeting under SIG Architecture, and today is June 11th, 2020. So we have a pretty light agenda. The first one is something that Ben raised, I think. I'm missing context on that, but I'll let Ben just walk through it.
Yeah. So before Ben starts complaining, I'll give a quick overview. What happened was we were iterating over CAD. So CAdvisor, we usually pull it just before a code freeze, typically, and we make a tag on CAdvisor, and then we pull it towards the end just before the code freeze. But recently what we've been doing is like do a periodic update of CAdvisor, because we were trying some things out and there were major changes that were going in. So we were trying hard to test it because we don't have adequate test coverage in CAdvisor itself. We have only a few operating systems and combinations of environments where things run. So we try to make it more frequent. CAdvisor lacks enough hands to test in other things as well. So, so the best way to do it is just throw it into the mix in Kubernetes and then let people go wild trying things out on everywhere that they usually try Kubernetes on. So that was our way of opening up CAdvisor to more things. But what happened was when the Klog request came in, the request was for structured logging. So we ended up updating a bunch of repositories to a newer version of Klog, and CAdvisor was one. And as a result, what happens is if there is a regression we find in CAdvisor, we can't go back to a previous version of CAdvisor. So that was the loop where CAdvisor got stuck in because we found that we did indeed break some scenarios where CPU was not being found and some other assorted problems. So what has happened is we basically broke kind from master running against Kubernetes master. That was the main thing. And there's a bunch of people who were waiting for the fixes, and then we haven't been able to move to newer CAdvisor because for one thing, the CPU fix landed yesterday, or there is probably one PR still in flight. So that's where we are currently. So we couldn't go back to a previous version of CAdvisor which used to work because we updated Klog in KK. So that's the whole story. Ben, do you want to add?
I would add, so we've discovered it in kind, but it turns out that it's just all Kubernetes of any sort is broken on any system with hyperthreading disabled. It was also broken on ARM, though I believe we did get that patch in. Now, though, we're running into, okay, so we can't roll backwards because of the Klog thing, but we also still can't roll forward because of all of the C group v2 stuff and I think gRPC incompatibilities. So I'm not sure there's any one individual problem here, but on the whole, we got into a point where we had a known bug. We really should have been able to say, okay, revert to the previous behavior. We've got this new shiny NUMA detection stuff, but it doesn't work on all systems yet. And we can tell from the bug fixes, we weren't really fully aware of the file system layout that we were trying to read through in CAdvisor. So the stuff was not stable yet. It wasn't ready, and we couldn't roll it back. And we are still unable to roll forward, and it's been over a month. We should not let our dependencies get into that state. I don't know how we can coordinate that better, but we've got a number of these changes going on that are like, oh, you have to roll forward. You have to do this anew. Like, we're changing the lib container interface. We're changing gRPC. We're changing Klog. think there's also something of a testing issue here that we missed some of these, but it didn't take us very long to detect it. It's just we were like, okay, well, we want to get this big sweeping change in, so we don't want to roll back. But we never managed to roll forward, and we still haven't. The fix is in C Advisor, but I was attempting to update that today, and it looks like we've got a few more organization messes, or the new problem with that.
Yeah. Plus, things got more complicated because we got sidetracked with the containerd run C problem as well. So that's a whole another thread we need to unspool. So yeah, but one bright light here is at least we know that we caught the problem earlier. It would have been even worse if we had done what we used to do before, where we cut C Advisor towards the end and actually shipping it, because not many people might have had a chance to try at that point. So that's a flip side of it.
We're lucky there that we had a member of the Istio team that tends to try to test with Kubernetes head on their corporate workstation at Google, where hyperthreading is disabled, and they caught this a while, but it took us a bit to pin down because it creates a strange failure mode where you have 0 CPUs and nothing schedules. I think my biggest problem is I don't understand why we got in a situation where that wasn't a simple revert of this completely new behavior of reading CPUs. I mean, we're using a completely different Linux mechanism to detect them. Before we were reading proc CPU info, and now we're reading this whole virtual file system that has different directories for different nodes and things. I understand the intention to pick up the new network. I don't understand why we weren't able to, even if we couldn't, revert Klog, why?
Yeah.
How did we get into a state where we kept just trying to roll forward for this long?
So I filed a revert, and David said, "Let's try to move forward."
Okay.
Katrina was doing a bunch of work
for this. I think rolling forward is reasonable, but surely we have to have some kind of cutoff point where, if reverting is going to take an entire release, then roll forward is going to take an entire release. It's not a roll forward anymore.
Yeah, at that point, we didn't have enough information that we have now to say that, yeah, it would have. Otherwise, I would have pushed for a revert. I did push for a revert, but then.
Right. Do we
didn't have enough information at that point?
For at least the projects we own, do we have a policy on how long we will try to roll forward on a breaking bug like this before, rolling something back? So typically we just do a knee-jerk and roll things back, but this was like C Advisor, which is not a community project as well.
I think it's directly proportionate to how strong the signal is that something is broken. So the fact that we didn't have a test that was failing or a test job that was failing, either as a pre-submit or as a release blocking job, we had the reports, so we knew it was a real issue, but it wasn't like a light that was green is now red and we need to get it green again.
Right.
It's a much stronger case. Those are the things that usually spawn a we need to roll this back. It was good on day 3, it was bad on day 5. Let's roll back to day 3. Those are the ones I typically see roll back.
I think we need something to cover the situation because, the fact that we somehow managed to break these particular CPU platforms doesn't seem like something we can scale testing of. I don't think we're gonna run special C Advisor tests on every CPU with every kernel configuration with hyperthreading on and off, and I think we need a way to say, okay, we don't have a CI signal here, but we know this is broken.
Okay, so let's two things here, right? One is leave the C Advisor is a special project, so it has a different set of rules. The other one is G Linux. Ben, I don't really care about G Linux, but if there's something else which is in public that we broke, then I would like to add a CI job for it.
I mean, so we
in
detected
KK.
this on G-Linux, but the bug has nothing to do with G-Linux.
It doesn't matter. If there is somebody else we are breaking, we add a CI job for that system.
Well, we do have that, Fedora CoreOS.
But we don't have upstream CI. There's nobody in the release team that is
What I'm
watching.
saying is, I don't think it's reasonable to try to have CI across every CPU to begin with every kernel configuration. If we have a user reporting that this is broken, we need to fix it. And CAdvisor may not officially be in project, but in practice, the maintainers are.
Right.
And Kubernetes has room to roll back.
Right. But again, this is not come at a release boundary. We are not trying to make a release and rolling back. This is, we haven't even reached code freeze. So I don't think it's a fair thing to, if this had happened after code freeze, then I would say, okay, you got to dial things back. We haven't reached code freeze yet.
Oh, we still don't have a path forward, right?
So what? We haven't reached code freeze. So we haven't really broken anything yet. We haven't broken anybody yet. Anyway, but yes, in general, I think that we should be more careful. But at this point, we didn't even have a choice of going back to rolling back all the 5 projects back in to Klog V1 either.
So that's actually what I would like to talk about more. I think the implications for SIG node, like there are some things that we should take to SIG node around test coverage and management of CAdvisor, and like I think those are good conversations to have. The Klog V2 rollout is what I'm more interested in here, because I think that has lessons we can take, like putting ourselves in a position where we have no way to go forward and no way to go backward is really problematic. And so thinking about how we did the V2 rollout, and if there are ways we could have done that differently that would have preserved our options.
We did have an option, Jordan, which we still do, which is go back to the old CAdvisor and use the Klog V1 plus V2, that the hack that we had for making sure that we don't lose the logs. So that is still on the table. I just don't want to do it, that's all.
I do
rather wait for CAdvisor to be fully fixed.
Yeah.
CAdvisor is fixed, but we're unable to pick it up.
When was it fixed? Yesterday, Ben, right?
Yeah.
It's fixed as far as we know. Like the known issues are fixed, but the fragile detection is still the thing being used. And so it's entirely possible we will discover
something
some other
else. Right.
CPU oddity. The switching, like pushing a concrete implementation into a bunch of dependencies and then trying to synchronously update all of those dependencies seems like it was an own goal. Like, I think the way I would have maybe approached it is switching to a logging interface and saying, like, let's have an interface that we can connect up to Klog V1 or to Klog V2, and that way we're not trying to coordinate like 5 or 6 downstreams all at once, and like once it's in, rolling back one means rolling back everything. Like there aren't a lot of dependencies that we have where we control the daemon dependency and then like try to propagate it out. This is the main one I'm aware of, but at least being aware of the situation and trying to avoid getting the same situation in the future would be good. What were you going to say, David?
I was going to say that I find the idea of having CI jobs for the CPU configurations or whatever it is here, various like Linux flavors. I see a reference to ARM. If we want those things to work, I think having CI jobs for them is pretty reasonable. I I can appreciate that something was found to be broken. But it's broken on my laptop is not something that is easy to objectively consider and say like it was broken on his laptop, so it reverted. I understand, like, sure, different people are different, and like maybe this particular person we have a lot of confidence in, but I do struggle with having this dependency. If we hadn't owned all the projects using Klog, we wouldn't have tried to update the dependency this way, would we? Right? Like we would have. Jordan's on mute, but I'm confident he's agreeing with me.
We don't own them all. We went out to all of them and like we contributed changes to them,
okay,
for our own benefit.
I mean,
Yeah.
so the fragile CPU detection thing, it's a serious regression that it doesn't work on some potential platform, and I still disagree. I do not think it is reasonable for us to try to fund and maintain CI for every possible like CPU out there. But I mean, we do support them. They were functioning perfectly fine before this change. The way that we detected things before was pretty robust. We're just counting the processors and proc CPU info. We switched to reading this underdocumented virtual file system, and it still probably has bugs.
I mean, so were you saying that the entire ARM architecture was broken?
That is the impression I got. I don't have access to testing that either.
Like, if we release an ARM version, it seems like there should be a test that tests against ARM. Like, David, I tend to agree, like every last CPU oddity, and like, I don't think that's reasonable. Like, it's an infinite number of combinations, but like an entire architecture, that seems egregious to me. If that's was actually what happened.
It's that, and also CPU hot plug, which is, I mean, debatable.
Yeah. And I think that conversation is probably belongs more to SIG than to us. I think our concerns should be around like what are we doing in the way we manage dependencies, and especially ones that are highly referenced, and can we improve how we make transitions there so that we don't put the project in a place it can't recover from easily.
Something that I think I'm missing here is why we couldn't have done the V1, V2 Klog shim thing temporarily.
Sorry,
Is that
repeat
because we don't trust this is enough of a problem, or because like mechanically we're unable to do that?
So the problem was we didn't want to go back to those 5-6 projects where we updated from V1 to V2 to roll them all back, and then including CAdvisor, and then go forward with the revert to CAdvisor.
Well, why do we need to roll all of them back simultaneously? If we have some kind of 1 to 2 shim, why do we need to roll back all of them?
I think Ben is asking, like, where we are right now, going forward with CAdvisor means pulling in a run C version that's like mid-development. Even picking up the new version of CAdvisor with the fix doesn't put us in a great place. If we rolled CAdvisor back to the last known good version, then that would be before CAdvisor picked up Klog v2, and we could shim Klog v1 to Klog v2. That would
that's fine with me, but it's not our call, right? It's SIG call.
I mean, it seems like it's been our call about the Klog thing. I'm not talking about changing CAdvisor itself. I'm talking about rolling back the CAdvisor dependency.
Yeah, I think when the CAdvisor thing was going on, we were saying like we can't pick up the new fix because this is in progress. And so if there's a way for them to pick up the new fix, I think some of the SIG Node folks would have rolled it back and shimmed it. So if we should give them the information about how to do that so they can decide if that's what they want to do. And then we should consider ways to improve both the rollout of things like Klog v2 and if there are different approaches, like an interface-based approach, that would mean we would not have such tight coupling between all these dependencies.
And the other thing is, I just feel like going and ripping out Klog from all those dependencies, so we don't have to deal with them. Just use basic logging stuff from Golang.
Because we already shim that into
Yes,
Klog.
yeah.
That seems like it, either basic Go logging or the interface. That seems better to me, but I haven't thought about it that much.
Right. Again, the motivation for the Klog v2 came from the structured logging. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even done, so many changes in Klog that we ended up with.
There is an interesting point there about the architectures we don't test. That's probably not a discussion for this meeting, but if we are going to say that, that is a much bigger call to make. And there are many architectures for which we've never had any testing that we release today. And we do normally pull in fixes for, such as S390X, PowerPC. There's also
so
Windows in general, we have pretty limited testing for. We definitely don't have Windows 32-bit testing. We have
right.
many platforms that we don't.
The thing that we tell there is it is as is. It may work, it may not work. We are not guaranteeing that it works. Other than AMD64.
I think that's the approach we've taken to these bugs.
I'm not talking about bugs, but this is a general statement of support for those architectures, right? It's use at your own risk. We are not. That is why when the risk folks came, we told them, look, you got to do a KEP, which thoroughly writes down all the things that they'll have to do.
I actually don't think that was super reasonable given that we continue to ship PowerPC and S390X.
Okay. So I'm trying to differentiate between picking up fixes and the general support statement that we are making about it, right?
Sure, but I mean, we do ship those platforms which we don't test. And we do fixes for them, and we do support for them.
Again, it is.
I'm not sure why these lines seem kind of.
That's a balance, right, Ben? We can't say no to some of these platforms because otherwise they'll never be able to make progress. So.
Sure, but okay, then I mean, why are we applying this differently to these two different platforms?
It is not different. What is different? It may not work, it may not work, right? That's what we are telling them. And if it doesn't work, we'll find a way to move forward.
Right, but the difference with Risk V is we blocked them from even building.
Well, I know. I wasn't my call, but I would have preferred to tolerate a risk. But then they did have another problem, Ben, which is they had some changes in Golang, which weren't in the version of Golang that we were using. So it wouldn't have worked anyway.
At the initial PR, but
yes, at the initial PR.
This is probably a discussion for SIG Node, but I
don't think equally. I think it's super strange that we release for architectures that we don't have tests for, and that we distinguish between we'll release a build for this architecture with no tests, but we're not going to release for that architecture because we can't guarantee that it works and we don't have tests like that. We should test what we release. If someone wants to contribute a fix that allows Kubernetes to build on a platform, and doesn't add complexity or add problems, like I don't have a problem with that. But changing our release scripts and being like, all right, here's the release for WebAssembly, and we're like, does it work? Like, if someone, the thing with releasing it is, if we release one version and someone consumes it and it works, they're like, great, you guys support this architecture. And then we release the next version and maybe something broke and we don't know because we don't have any tests, and they upgrade and they're like, look, I was working and you broke me. And that's a reasonable thing for them to say. And saying like, well, I don't know, we just built it, we don't know if it works. Like, that's really compelling.
Which is exactly what we are saying for G-Linux, right? It used to work, it doesn't work anymore.
Right, but there's nothing esoteric about that platform. It's just Intel architecture.
Yeah, I wouldn't overtrain on G-Linux. I would.
There's nothing particularly G-Linux about having hyperthreading disabled.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty standard mitigation.
Especially given vulnerabilities, recent vulnerabilities, like disable hyperthreading is a thing that a lot of Linux servers are doing, especially virtualized, like shared environment servers. So that doesn't seem like the same issue as here's an entire architecture that we've never actually even run or tried. So, but I agree. These are questions for SIG-Node and or SIG release, not really us. Our place is like, how are we helping the project be able to pick up fixes or roll things back or roll things forward? Are there things that we're doing that are causing problems or recommendations we can make? So Dims, if you want to like jump into the cAdvisor issue and say, like, if you want to roll cAdvisor back to the last known good level, even though that means cAdvisor would be logging to klog v1, here's how you can do that and like temporarily shim klog v1 to v2. Like, doing that for the cAdvisor logs, the volume of logs coming from cAdvisor, like that, I don't know, that doesn't seem like it would be that problematic. And give SIG-Node the information so they can make the decision, like, do we want to roll back while we work out whatever's going on in cAdvisor? If you want to.
Yeah, I can do that, Jordan, for sure. Yeah.
I will probably copy the notes, maybe with some explanation, into a thread and start that with SIG release and SIG-Node and say, like, this happened, it's not great. This seems inconsistent. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So can we spend a few more minutes on the moving forward bit, just in case that's something that we could entertain as well. So for moving forward, the issue right now is we need to pick up a newer etcd because of one of the dependencies fails otherwise. One of the things fails otherwise. So we need a newer dependency of etcd and grpc to get picked up. If we are able to do that quickly, then we can rev up cAdvisor. So that's what I spent some time yesterday, and that's where I ended up with.
Don't we also wind up with the libcontainer and runc?
Yeah.
Mid-release change.
The where are we now bullet, rolling forward to the currently fixed version of cAdvisor.
Yeah. So on the runc thing, I pushed back majorly on updating runc to an intermediate SHA in cAdvisor, and then they came back, they looked at it, they came back and they said, oh, you're not using C groups v2 in Kubernetes, so it's not going to affect you. And they had like a set. And then in the end, it wasn't my call because the change was going into cAdvisor, not KK.
Sure,
So
sure. Not here. I'm saying that isn't that also going to wind
yes.
up being something of a problem with the roll forward?
Yeah, so that's what the PR that I pointed you to from Giuseppe, that updates both the C advisor and run C. And then I told Giuseppe that that's not enough. We need to pull in newer HCD and gRPC.
Right, and that also has the lib container changes that, again, change the interface we depend on and are not actually just secret v2 changes.
So
yes,
what it sounds like to me is there are a lot of issues that need to be resolved before we can confidently pick up a new C advisor.
Yes,
if
that's
it was
fair.
So yeah, if we should discuss this with SIG but my recommendation would definitely be go back to last known good C advisor.
So Ben and Jordan, between the two of you, can you talk to David, please?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because that's where this needs to get worked on a little bit more.
And I'm not sure if this was what Jordan was referring to earlier, but I think we should actually go back to SIG release outside of this meeting and talk some more about the architectures we're building.
Yeah.
There's something about the point that we've been overlooking, that we have a bunch of builds that we just have no coverage on of any sort.
We have tracking issues for some of them, and people have been promising stuff and they haven't been showing up. So if we want to remove architectures, then we need to start the conversation and to get rid of them. On the same side, Windows, right? What do we test on Windows? Why do we even ship Windows, right? So that's, if you want to open up that can of worms, yeah, I'm happy to, start that thread too.
One of them would be, we have some very limited testing of the clusters, but I believe all the client stuff we don't, and I think we still ship the client for like 32-bit or something.
Yeah, the HCH shim has been a thorn in my back for a while, so I don't want to deal with that anymore either. In the same vein, somebody brought this to my attention that look, DIMS, we don't even do any conformance testing for Windows nodes. Like, why is that even something that we are allowing as a project, right? Why do we have an architecture where you can't run conformance tests with only Windows only nodes in a Kubernetes,
Yeah, as fascinating as it is for us to talk about this, I don't think the right people are on this call.
I'm just venting because Ben gave me permission.
Sorry about that. I apologize for taking this so off topic. I
think they're good questions. I think we should start that conversation with like SIG release for the build stuff, SIG Arch conformance for the conformance bits. Like, they're good questions.
Right. Why do they get a pass, right?
I agree, and that's been another area that the tests are coming and we're working on it, and they're not there.
Exactly. Anyway, that was a good session, Ben. Thank you.
I'll look into how manageable it is to get up a CI with hyperthreading off. I'm not sure if that's a thing that any provider lets you toggle, and I don't know if we have access to any that have it off. But I'll look around.
Okay. Sounds good.
You done reviewing?
Sorry, I'm just writing the action items on the agenda.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, I could do that after the call. We don't have to wait around. Is there anything else that needs to be discussed, or?
This was the big one.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we end 20 minutes early then? Give folks some time back.
Sounds good.
Yes, please. Unless someone else has something.
Thanks,
Over
everyone.
David, anything?
Off topic, bench
Nope.
space.
I was really interested in how vendoring got stuck and where we were, so I'm good otherwise.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.